Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We are sitting here with another amazing guest for you today. We have with us Jannette Anderson. Jannette is the founder of the Maturepreneur World, a visionary entrepreneur, adventurer, and seasoned business coach who leverages over 40 years of experience to help entrepreneurs dramatically scale their businesses, bridging the gap between inspiration and impactful action. Jannette, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am super happy to be here, despite our depressing conversation earlier. Talking politics these days can be challenging.
It is, but I think we're just blowing off steam in the green room as there's nothing wrong with that. We have
Exactly.
a lot of we have a lot of ground that we can cover today, I'm sure. But before we get into that, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. The the question for you is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most, and why?
I would love to say Jessica Rabbit because I think she's kind of all that in a bag of chips. However, I think I'm probably more like many entrepreneurs, more like Wile E. Coyote, constantly chasing that damn rabbit. I think that's probably more true to form and trying all sorts of different schemes and approaches and business models and so forth to see what will catch the elusive market.
I like that. There's nothing wrong with Wiley's motivation.
Not as competent as he would like to be.
But how much of that was marketing and Acme Corporation's fault?
Well, potentially, the tool is only as good as the implementation.
Exactly. I just remembered that too. The Acme Corporation, right?
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
used to love those. I used to love those cartoons as a kid. Jeanette, why don't you tell us how you define procrastination and what does it mean to you personally?
Well, I think that procrastination simply is decisions deferred, and it is something that we have resistance to on a conscious or subconscious level. And therefore we're not dealing with it. So one of the things that I do when I want to deal with procrastination is actually just taking a look at what is the resistance? What am I resisting? And not just the action, but what does it mean or what does it represent or what is it about? What does that call on in me that I don't like doing or whatever? So I think that's part of it is looking at what is it that I'm resistant to and why? And can I get this done some other way? Is there some other way to get around that, whatever that block or barrier may be? And if and so it could be delegate, it could be decide not to do, it could be dump, not do it at all, or simply do it. But one of the things that really helps me if I'm in resistance is to change my environment or create accountability. So if I work from home and there are times where if I'm really struggling to do content creation or write on my book or something like that, if I go to a restaurant, I'm far more productive, even though it's noisy and busy and so forth. It's just that kind of white noise really helps me to focus. Or I do a Pomodoro with a friend or a colleague or even a client where we get on Zoom together. We set a little timer, we say what we're going to do, and then we do the thing. Sometimes having someone just watch you is enough accountability to actually do the thing. That's if I'm really resistant to something and I have to actually do it. So those are some of the steps that I go through.
I love that. The accountability and also changing the environment. Both things can help a lot. I'm curious. Do you also use? You said that you use like a Pomodoro with a colleague on Zoom. So do you use any apps for that, like FocusMate or anything?
No, you can get Pomodoro timers that are free and stuff, and sometimes we might bring that up, but I usually just use my phone, put a timer on, and when it goes off, then we stop because we usually put ourselves on mute. So I'll put the timer on, and then I'll come off mute and say, okay, that's time. But you can get apps like FocusMate, and you can actually get Focus Buddies if you don't have a partner or buddy. There's a site, I can't remember the name of it right now, but you can get like people to do those little accountability sessions with strangers. So there's no reason for not doing them. People say, I don't have anyone that's available during the day or whatever. It's like, yeah, there's a whole world of them on that site. I just can't remember what it's called right now.
There's a few of them. FocusMate is one. They have 5 minute and 10 minute, 25 minute, I think, sessions and things like that. One of the things that many of us procrastinate on is actually starting our business, and especially, I really love talking to you because your niche right now is the maturepreneur, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I was thinking about procrastination before this, I have a kind of a different take on it from the perspective of a lot of maturepreneurs, and that's more in the realm of delayed gratification. So I started my first business. Well, I started my first business when I was 5. I had a lemonade stand, but and actually that was my first franchise too, because there was 3 other corners that were really busy, and I couldn't get to all the traffic. So I went to my mom and said, we got to make more signs and jugs. And remember those old TV trays with the 4 TV trays in them? I took out the other 3 TV trays, recruited 3 of my friends, stuck them on the other 3 corners, gave them lemonade and signs, and they got 50% of what they made, and we got the other 50%. So that was my first franchise. And my first business was actually when I was 11 with an employee. I had a daycare. I lived in a housing tenement, and I had a daycare during the summer. And my first employee was a 9-year-old I used to babysit who helped me with all the kids. Sometimes we had up to 30 kids for the whole day. And I still remember I made a killing. It was only $3 a day per kid at that point, and I paid him $1 an hour, and I fed them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every single day. My mom made me make them do bologna one day, but yeah, it was a good business. Anyways, um, and a very kind of locked in market. Coming back to procrastination, so I've been in business my whole life. I think I came out of the womb entrepreneurial, but I've had 4 iterations of my business because sometimes I get seduced back into the corporate world by the thought of, ooh, stability and benefits, oh my. And then I go back in and I remember why I hate it. Ooh, politics and bullshit and bureaucracy, oh my. And I leave and go back to my business again. So I've had 4 iterations that have been predominantly in the realm of helping entrepreneurs grow their business, marketing, sales, strategy, event planning, things like that. But recently, 2020, I experienced ageism firsthand. I notionally knew it existed, but I was on something called the Marketer's Cruise. And there's a thing called Pizza and Profits. It's networking late at night, starts at 11, goes till 2, 3 in the morning. Someone asked me, what do you do? I was mid sentence answering him, and he turned and started talking to someone else. And Chris, I thought, well, what a dick. So I politely excused myself because I'm Canadian, and off I went to the next group. Same thing happened. So I thought, okay, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not showing up. Maybe it's my energy is low or something like that. But no, I'm pretty visible, polka dotty glasses, blue hair. I'm pretty visible, pretty energetic. And so I started observing every person over 60, and especially the women, and especially if they had gray hair, were literally invisible. I don't mean just, ignored. I mean not seen. And so I started to get really curious about what was going on in ageism and what was happening with older people, etc. And there's 2 epidemics and 2 trends that are happening right now that are creating what I call this perfect storm of opportunity that is happening, that really is unprecedented ever in history, that's changing the face of business. And most people are not paying any attention to it, especially business people, well, and government and society. So pretty much everybody. So I think that's really what's got me excited about the Maturepreneur World, solving some of those problems and really providing older people. My definition of that is those who are 55 plus and hashtag not done by a long shot, providing them with visibility, being financially viable and valued, because that's what's missing. So that's my goal. Now, where it ties into procrastination is, I think a lot of in our society, we're kind of raised to, you grow up, you go to school, then you go to university, then you get a good job, then you get married, you have 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, and then you retire. That's the kind of old model. And many boomers and Gen Xers grew up with that and did that. And what ended up happening is many of them procrastinated on doing what was really their heart's desire, what was really meaningful and important to them. They put those dreams on the shelf and they did what they were supposed to do and got the corporate job or became a tradesman or something so that they could support their family, etc. What's really awesome about this period is that many of those people now can stop procrastinating on those dreams and actually start rewriting their next chapter and stepping into what it is that they might have longed for their whole life, what it is they might have wanted to be when they were a little kid or when their youth, or in middle age or whatever that was. So it's a period of the end of procrastination for a lot of people.
I love that. I love the way that you frame that. And I mean, it's true. Society tells us we got to go out, we got to work the same job, but then society doesn't provide us the same job
Yeah.
anymore. And wow.
Yeah. Well, all of that is a myth now, all of it. And especially retirement. Retirement was created by Otto von Bismarck back in the Industrial Revolution because he wanted to get rid of older workers so he could bring in younger workers. Now, it's still being used that way. Younger, cheaper workers. It's still being used that way, but retirement at 65 is no longer logical or practical because people are regularly living to 100 now, at least 85, 90. So you've got 20, 30, even 40 years past quote unquote retirement. And people, A, don't have enough money for that. B, don't want to just knit and golf for 30 years, for the love of God. So they need meaning and purpose, and they need to stay active and vital. And you can't do that. 1 in 3 people really struggle when they retire, have mental health issues because of that lack of meaning and purpose. It's super important. In fact, being lonely and not having a sense of purpose, the World Health Organization likens to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And statistically, it will take 7 years off your life, and you will be unhappier and unhealthier than if you have meaning, purpose, and connection. And conversely, when you have meaning and purpose, you live 8 years longer, happier, healthier, more effective years. So it's super important that people pause and figure out, who am I now that I'm not who I have been? Who am I? What do I want now that I get to put me on the top of the list? Right? They could have all along, but they were raised not to. And now what?
You bring up an interesting question about purpose and your kind of your mission. You said something interesting to me actually. If you recall one of our first conversations, you said that what was it, your mission or your calling is the intersection of your.
So I believe that your purpose, or what I call your why, because purpose and mission are kind of laden terms. So I call it your why you do what you do. And my definition of your why is that it's consistent throughout your life. It's like a thread that weaves through the tapestry of our life. And my definition of it is different than a lot of people. It's not what you do. People think, oh, I'll find my purpose when I find the right job. No, you won't. You'll find a job. Your purpose is the intersection between what you're healing from the past and what you long for the future, for yourself and others. So the intersection between what you're healing from the past and what you long for the future. I believe that's kind of our soul's work in this lifetime, what we're learning, what we're creating, who we're being. That's our purpose. And we each have what I call a unique note in the choir. I at our core, most of us basically want to matter, want to love and be loved. There's some fundamental human needs, but we have our own take on that. We have our own, perspective on that. And when we find what that is, it's easier to make strategic decisions. It's easier to make sure that you're aligned with what you're doing, who you're with, relationships, who you hire. Like, there's clients you work with. There's a lot that really informs our life when we're clear on what our purpose is, or our why.
I really love that. When your why is high, your cost is low. It raises another question. When you're talking about these maturepreneurs and trying to find their sort of, I guess, their niche, right? What do you think is the biggest challenge that's facing maturepreneurs?
There's a number of them. So aside from the societal blocks and barriers and systemic ageism, for instance, good luck trying to get business insurance or a business loan or VC capital or anything like that. And good luck trying to get a job if you're over 55 or 60. Like, it's just not possible these days, no matter how qualified you are. We're extremely hard, let's put it that way. So aside from those systemic issues, which are big, there's a few primary things. One is our internal ageism, how we talk to ourselves, how society talks to us, but then we take that on. Well, I'm kind of done. I'm too old for that. I can't learn new things. Any of those limiting beliefs that frankly, A, are not true, and B, are really limiting. And by the way, to check out whether or not your language, internal or in the world, is ageist, there's a great site called Yo, Is This Ageist? Yo, Is This Ageist by Ashton Applewhite. And you can, put phrases in there or just scroll through, and it's really insidious. It's really simple little things like, you look good for your age. What does that mean? Like, what does 30 look like? What does 40 look like? What does 80 look like? And yeah, it's subtle little things. So internal ageism is a big block as well. That generation, by and large, grew up with the notion of get a job, then retire. And so to think of reinventing, and they're not entrepreneurial by nature, many of them. They've been employees their whole life. Making the switch from employee to entrepreneur, that's a pretty big leap for a lot of people, and not everyone can be an entrepreneur. So that's a block and a barrier, but almost everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. One thing a lot of people don't know is 65% of North Americans cannot afford to retire. 65% have to continue earning. So they have to get a job. Again, good luck. Or they have to become an entrepreneur and generate some kind of income, or so, a freelancer or something, consultant, something like that. So one of the issues is figuring out how to make the leap. Another issue is figuring out how to capitalize on their skills and so forth. They've been on a track. And so besides just consulting on that track, what else is possible? Well, these people have a wealth of experience and expertise and wisdom and perspective. There's many, many things that they could do, but they don't have that training in how to really see themselves objectively and value the skills and abilities that they have, because they've only been valued in a certain way for certain things. So unlearning that and learning to think broader. And so really understanding how to value themselves. And then what do I love doing? For so long, many of these people have been living lives of shoulds and obligations and expectation. Nothing, it's not right or wrong, it's just what is. And now there is the option to replace that with the question, what do I love to do? What's meaningful? What's purposeful? How do I want to contribute? Who do I want to be? These kinds of questions. And those can be daunting, because when you're not used to thinking about what you love, it's really hard. I can't tell you how many times I ask clients, or just people, in conversation, what do you love doing? They kind of, they might rattle off two or three things, and then they get the deer in the headlights and the dog tilt head, and then they kind of start to look sad because they don't know beyond those one or two or three things, and most of those are pretty, you know, surfacey. Yeah, that's some of the challenges is, what do I want to do? How do I do that? How do I make the transition from how I've been my whole life to who I need to be now? And how do I get over these blocks and barriers that are internal and external?
No, those are some very good questions. Thanks for sharing those insights. I'm going to ask a question here that I think is going to be of interest to everybody. Not only just maturepreneurs, but when you look at it, in your experience and working with these maturepreneurs, do they need to be up to date with all the technological stuff, or do they need to delegate? Do they need to go grassroots? Do they need to, like even for me, like what do I do?
Yeah. Well, okay. So a couple of things. One, first of all, I think we need a little bit of a reset, to remind ourselves that we invented the internet. We invented AI. You're welcome. This thought that, oh, these people are, technological troglodytes. No, not everybody. I have a 76-year-old friend who can run circles around people with AI and video production and so forth, and all things technical. She just loves it and she laps it up, right? Now, is there a technological gap? In some cases, yes, especially those that came from what I'm going to call more senior positions, where they weren't necessarily hands-on in whatever they were doing in their business or their. So the more senior a person is, the more they tended to delegate, therefore the less they may have hands-on skills. But that doesn't necessarily the case. But yes. Now, can they relearn? Absolutely. Because one of the benefits of this generation is we learned how to learn. the generation, and what I mean by that, because there are multiple generations within that band, but by and large, boomers and Gen Xers learned how to learn. Boomers for sure. Gen Xers somewhat was kind of on the tail end, but then that went out of the school curriculum and out of how we did what we do. So millennials and Gen Zs and so forth struggle with that. They have a harder time figuring out how to figure things out if they don't know it. And God help them if you ever took away their phone or Google. They couldn't cope. They couldn't deal. Like I went through McDonald's the other day. Yes, it's true. And I bought something for $9.50. I gave the girl a 20. She got out a calculator. So I just kind of like, that was sad. That's sad but true. And so I think that's one of the advantages we have, is that we are, and in that era, there was more of a there are people who are constant learners, and I think that was more featured and valued in that era. Therefore, these are people who say, I'll just figure it out. I'll learn it. Not all, but a good, healthy percentage. So is it an issue? Less than people think. Can they do the work? Absolutely. Most of them are coming in at a senior level because of their expertise and experience. So yes, they'll delegate a lot of the hands-on work again, because that's what is appropriate when you're managing or consulting or whatever. And those that do need to learn it, like myself and other entrepreneurs and so forth, you learn it. There are tons of resources and they can learn. We're not, our brains aren't out to pasture like people might think.
Well, no, for sure, no. And I often wonder, um, that we seem to have this ageism, like you said, and I mean it is getting bad because anybody who's over 26 now is considered a dinosaur. I did some research in my own area, and especially like entry level jobs, or like even mid level jobs. If you're over 26, forget it. And I find that interesting that we discard all that information. We have members of society who are 60 plus, who know how to build things, who know how to do carpentry things. And yet when I go to the local university, the facilitators are like, maybe 28, 30.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really unfortunate, but I think it will shift, and here's why. There's an employee shortage, and that's going to force people to go to an employee pool, and the only one that exists is this demographic. And the reason for that is, it used to be that 200 people came into the workforce for every 100 that left. That's switched now. 80 are coming in for every 100 that are leaving. The longer that goes on, the more the employee shortage is going to become a crisis. It's already starting to impact businesses. It will become such an issue that they'll have to close down, because they won't be able to get workers unless they go to the unemployed. And the unemployed circle is either those who are older and want to work, or those who are unemployed for a reason and don't want to or can't, right? So they will have to go to that older pool. It's just not going to happen as soon as I would like it to be. And it's going to have to overcome the ageist biases, the thoughts that, oh, if I hire someone older, they won't be here long. The reality, and factually, they will be there longer. They're loyal. They'll be there at least 5 to 10, and in some cases, 15 and 20 years. Whereas you can pretty much guarantee that if you hire a millennial, the most you'll get out of them is 2.5 years. They tend to change jobs every 1.5 to 2 years statistically. So you're going to have to hire 3 or 4 people versus that one boomer. And the cost of finding, hiring, onboarding, ramping up, and getting productive, one person, because one of the other objections is they're more expensive because they want to come in at the top of the range. Yep. But I guarantee you the cost benefit, if you do the analysis, they're going to be cheaper, because not only do they bring expertise and hit the ground running faster and provide more value because they have that wisdom and expertise and experience, but they're not going to turn over like the others are and create all the disruption that goes with the cost waste. So people really just need to wrap their head around the reality versus the misconceptions.
Well, I won't start down the rabbit hole of what reality is or isn't right now, but we'll
Yeah.
we'll We'll
Probably
leave
why.
it at that. But it's really great. And can you tell us a little bit about the kinds of businesses that maybe we're looking at? Because I'm sure that our listeners are interested, and hey, even going on down the path, I'm interested too. What sorts of businesses are you helping to set up?
Well, a lot of them are service-based professionals. That's what I've done most of my life, is work with service providers, so people who sell what they know. And or service providers like, holistic practitioners or therapists or massage therapists or various different things like that. A lot of coaches, a lot of trainers, a lot of consultants. I think a lot of what where we truly add value is with the expertise and skill set, but also with the human capitals. Again, statistically, when you bring an older worker into the workforce, morale goes up because they have a higher level of emotional intelligence. And so it brings up morale. So that's another reason to hire older people. But what businesses they're starting is typically in the direction of the synthesis between, or what I try and help people with is figuring out, what do you love? What are you best at? What are you really good at? And where's the demand? Okay, so what do you love? What are you best at? Where's the demand? When we find that sweet spot, then you can build a business around it. Almost anything can become a business, right? Underwater basket weaving might have a little less demand than some things, but I'm sure somewhere you could sell that. But there is almost anything can be turned into a business because those services or information or expertise or programs or counseling or whatever is needed. The challenge is what they don't have is the skills, and this is for any entrepreneur of any age, is it's not just about what do you do, what are you hanging your shingle out as? It's about becoming a business person, learning how to do sales, marketing, operation, run a business. The biggest challenge, and Michael Gerber wrote about this about, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago in the E-Myth, is people think that they just need to, be a cabinet maker and they can go and turn that into a business. Nope. Need to know how to be a really good cabinet maker who knows how to run a business, because otherwise you're going to be a broke cabinet maker. So, the people now that are reinventing themselves, they need to learn two or three things. One, I believe you need to learn what your purpose is or your why, and build your business around your life, not the other way around. Most of our life, we have built our life around our career or our business. Put it second. I think one of the biggest transitions that's needed is to build your business around your life. So you want to have a mobile lifestyle like me? Do that. Build your business that way. You want to work part time? Do that. You want to go all in on nonprofit? Do that. You want to, build your life or your business around your life. So figure out your why. What matters to you? What's your purpose? What will light you up and give you a sense of contribution and meaning going forward? Second, how do you practically turn that into a vision? Because you got to have the vision of that and how it looks first. Then, what's the strategy to accomplish that, to monetize it, to get it out into the world? And then taking really getting into action and doing the things. And the final thing is get support at every step of that stage, every stage of that process, because it's next to impossible for us to see what's on the end of our nose. I'm a coach who has two coaches. I don't think coaches should be hired if they don't have a coach, because we can't see you can't see the label if you're inside the jar. So, especially those that are reinventing themselves, they need that external perspective on what's possible so that they can dream bigger.
No, I love that, and can't see the label from the inside of the jar. Well, suppose that's true too. I like that one. I might steal that one.
Go for it. I stole it from someone else. So, actually, to practically answer your question, almost anything that is a passion you can turn into a business. Many are becoming gig workers, so they're turning into graphic designers or coaches or consultants, or they're going in and doing corporate training. I've got a client who's was a doctor and an OD and therapist, but wants to go into coaching on stress relief for doctors. So we're creating programs for frontline healthcare workers on how to manage the stress and the devastation that actually happens to frontline healthcare workers in terms of their marriage and their money and their well-being and their health and everything. So she's creating programs based on that because that's something she really cares about. It's obviously in her wheelhouse, her field of expertise. It combines the heart and the head that she has and is much needed. So that's an example. Following the thread of, and it doesn't have to be what you've done your whole life. It can be what you've learned from what you've done your whole life and apply it some other way.
No, I love that. Taking what else you've learned and apply it, not just what you've learned at work. I really love that. Emotional intelligence is one of those. Let me ask you and again, especially as we're trying to scale businesses. Let's say that we've gotten out there, we've retired, and we've got our little we've got our business. When you're looking to scale, do you scale wide or do you scale deep?
Okay, good question. And for some people, so often what kind of happens, and I've had this conversation with a number of people lately, they retire and they're like, I'm not doing anything for a year. Because frankly, we're tired when we finish that sprint of our life. We're tired. So take a year off, take 2 years off. Volunteer a little bit in there so you get out of the house, but take that time to recuperate and to really go inside, to sit with you and God, you and nature, whatever is your way of being grounded in what matters. And consider what could be next. What could my next chapter be? For some people, legacy is really important. For people like me, it's not. I don't have kids. I don't have a lot of family connections. So legacy is not a big thing for me. So when you're scaling, you got to consider why you're scaling. Is it because you like the challenge? Is it because you want to create a legacy? Is it because you want to have more money when you exit? Like, what's the purpose of the scaling? Whether scaling up or down, by the way, why? That will dictate how and the direction you go in. So, because if you, for instance, are scaling a business so that you can sell it and have an exit, well, then you got to grow that business so that it's really stable and appealing to the buyer. Hopefully, started the business with that buyer in mind, and you put in place what they need to be able to buy it. That could be a whole bunch of delivery capability. It could be not padding it with a whole bunch of costs, but actually keeping it highly profitable and small. So it depends on who that end buyer is and what the exit is. If you're doing it for legacy, then and your kids or your family agree they want this legacy passed on to them, you got to check that. Otherwise, it becomes an obligation, and then they live a life of obligation, shoulds, and have tos. So, what kind of business do they want to run? And then build it for that. Really, it's about, and whatever business you start, what do you want it to do for you? That's why I say build the business around the life. What's it going to look like when it's your ideal life? That's why you want to create that vision, your ideal vision, your ideal business, or your ideal life, your ideal business. For me, I don't want to manage a lot of people. I've done it. I've been in corporate. Frankly, I don't like it. And I'm not good at it, really. It's not my forte. I care about people, but I hate being micromanaged. And so I tend to not give people enough direction. I just throw it over the fence and assume they're going to run with it because that's what I would want people to do for me. And that's not helpful. Most people need more support and direction. So I don't want to manage a lot of people. So I've got a team of 2 VAs, and that's great. And one technical company that supports me. That's perfect. We can do a lot in the world. We can create a world-class business with that. So you also really got to think about, what do you want your day-to-day to be? What are those things that you want to be doing? So scaling is really, the number one question is why? Two question is to what end? And then the third question is, how do we do this to reach that end with the least amount of effort and the greatest amount of return? That's always my question for any business activity, is how do we do this to get the greatest return for the least effort and expense?
No, I love that. It raises an interesting sort of dichotomy, or maybe an interesting question. I would have a hypothesis that maybe one of the niches is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is to try and keep that human aspect to the business. And do you think that we're going to see that more with maturepreneurs than we will with traditional businesses?
Think so. I don't have anything to base that on except for my experience. Like, I don't have any statistics around that. But yes, intuitively, I would think that is the case because we tend to come more from purpose, from being purpose driven or purpose led. And so therefore it tends more on the contribution side of the equation. It doesn't mean that you don't have people who are purely motivated by money and purely, usurious or whatever in this demographic. Of course you do. There's in every era, there are people who don't really care about anything or anyone, but I think that's a very small minority. And yes, I do think that this, people often call them seniors, but really there's all sorts of controversy and challenge around what you even call them. I just call them elders or people. They tend to have more perspective on the issues and therefore are more concerned about making sure that we're around for a while and that we do deal with humanity. And we do, I think that there is more love involved in a lot of the businesses and the people that I deal with. A lot of what they do is about being loving in the world. So I don't know if that's the norm or it's just who I work with, but I think that's probably fair to say that they care.
No, and I really love that. We got to bring, keep the human in business.
Mhm.
Just on that though, I'm interested on your take because I'm sure that you're following it very closely as well. The advance of AI has been great. It's a fact of life, like you said before, not going anywhere. But what do you think that we can do to sort of, I guess, future proof against that? Because I mean, statistically speaking, we're going to be losing. Well, and again, these are words. Um, on like the low end, 50% of all soft skill jobs. This includes mine, obviously,
Mhm.
within the next decade. Or, if you go to like the super, I guess, optimistic version of full blown automation, we're going to lose about 98% of those. So, how do you sort of take that into account when you're making these plans for businesses in the future?
You do and you don't. So one, we have to take it into account. And what I've always heard is the people who will be replaced are the people who are not using AI effectively. So the graphic designer who doesn't use AI to help them be a graphic designer, or the ghostwriter who doesn't use AI to help them ghostwrite. There are elements that currently AI cannot replace. That human face to face, belly to belly, heart to heart interaction matters to people and always will. There is nothing that can be created, including very lifelike robots, that will replace the function of hugging another human being and being cared about by another human being. AI can pretend to care about me, but it doesn't really. It can say the right things, but it doesn't really. And so it is really about that humanity component. So that needs to be built into every business is caring. That I think will be an aspect of future proofing. Being using the tools, businesses who didn't adopt the internet or email did not succeed. This is like that. If you didn't take that ride, you were left behind. So we can't ignore it. We do need to utilize it. We do need to learn it. It's not hard. It will have detrimental effect because there will be people who are bad people who use it for harm, just as there is the dark web with all sorts of bad stuff on it. And just as there is fake news and there is all sorts of, bullying by email and social media, bad people do bad things when they have a platform. Good people do good things when they have a platform. It's what do we want to accentuate and amplify? That's why I think it's so critical to not step over what I call the wisdom workforce. We need that wisdom. We need that grounding more than ever. There is, I think, no other cohort than this older generation who has that global perspective, has the perspective, some of us were born before TVs, that the perspective of what this means to move through stages of humanity and have the impact of various things. We have that perspective. 20-year-olds don't. They grew up with a smartphone, right? So I think we need them to bring perspective. So does that turn into a business? advisors, think tanks, council, advisory boards or councils. There's a lot of places where wisdom can come into play. Even just how do you keep the humanity in your organization? So I think, yes, it's going to be a challenge. Yes, it is a challenge for people of every age. And yes, you better figure out what the value is that you provide beyond what can be done by any technology, not just AI. AI is a super competent technology, but jobs were lost when automation of robots came in and went on to assembly lines. Jobs were, and people retooled. They didn't just go away. That whole demographic didn't just go away. They found other jobs or they operated the robots, right? So we can't hold back time. What we can do is surf that wave.
Wow, it's such an amazing nugget there. I hope we get a short minute of that one. Jannette, it's been a great conversation. I could probably go on like this for another 7 or 8 hours. It could be the longest running episode in history, but we are coming up pretty close to the time.
I love to talk, so I would love that too.
Yeah.
And I love your inquiring mind, and you ask deeper questions than a lot of podcasters. So I appreciate that as well.
Speaking of that, is there anything that you wish I would have asked but didn't ask, or anything you feel we should have covered but didn't cover?
Aside from my shameless plug, no. I think really truly the only thing that I would really encourage people is get support in this transition, whatever transition you're in. Because if you're asking what's next, there are so many possibilities. And embrace the fact that there are possibilities and options, because it can feel like there aren't. It can feel very daunting, in fact, downright depressing and many people do go into this age, get to be 60 and all of a sudden they're depressed because, oh my God, I'm now obsolete. No, you're not. Get over yourself. Get up, get out, go do something. Contribute, make a difference, take up ballroom dancing, learn a new language, go volunteer at a soup kitchen, start a business, something. You're not done. Pitter patter, let's get at her. We got things to do. The world needs you and your wisdom and your expertise and your experiences. So step up. That's what I'd say.
I love that. Such a powerful note to end things on. Just before we go, though, how can our audience reach out to you and learn more about the mature?
All right. Well, I do have a site called Maturepreneur World. So it's mature, the full word, and then preneur from entrepreneur. .world. And I have a community, a network that's a low-cost network that supports people in figuring out, because there's three groups of subgroups in this market. The getting clear, so what's next? Who am I now that I'm not that? What am I want to do, etc. The getting going, those who are launching whatever that next stage is, so nonprofit, social enterprise, hobby business, whatever, and the keeping going. Those who have been at it for a while and maybe tired, maybe disconnected from their why, maybe scaling up, maybe scaling down, but they need help with their next step. And often, people like me who've been at it for 40 years, there are times where we just kind of like run out of steam. So they need support as well. So I support all three of those, but predominantly the getting clear and the keeping going. There's a lot of resources in your communities for the getting going. Go and check government websites, take a look at business startup. There are tons of programs and that are available, not necessarily for specific age brackets, but for entrepreneurial startup, for people who are creating nonprofits, etc. So go to Maturepreneur World, .world. Facebook group is Maturepreneur World as well. Come and join our community. If you've got questions, share them, or just reach out to me directly. I would love to provide a complimentary chat about what's next for you and help you brainstorm, whether it's what do I do to grow my business or what business is even possible for me. Let's brainstorm. I love solving those questions and those problems. So please reach out and connect with me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jannette. And to our listeners, don't worry. We're going to put that in the show notes for you. So don't worry about grabbing a paper and pen. It'll all be there for you, really easy to find. Jannette, thank you so much for being on the show today. And, to all our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation and inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.